The study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, July 9th is called to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Kaufman.
Here.
Pro Tem Gardner.
Here.
Member Bergen. Here. Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, I said yes.
Councilmember Coombs.
Present.
Councilmember Jurenski.
Here.
Councilmember Lawson.
Here.
Councilmember Marcano.
Present.
Councilmember Medina. Councilmember Murillo.
Present.
Councilmember Sundberg.
Here.
Councilmember Zvonik.
Here.
Okay, there's no mayor update. Are there any issue updates? Seeing none, Denver International Airport 2023 informational update, Cindy Collop.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Cindy Collett, Public Works Director for the city. Excited tonight to be joined by Den to provide a general update on their projects, their programs, and their initiatives. This was presented at the TAPS Policy Committee back in May. We are joined by Crystal D. Herrera, Chief of Staff and Executive Vice President at Den. And I believe Rachel Gruber is also joining, the Manager of Regional Affairs for Den. So I will turn it over to Crystal. Welcome. Hey, Crystal, you're muted. Sorry.
Crystal, we still can't hear you.
You might need to go to the audio settings at the top of the WebEx.
Crystal, if it's helpful, when I joined, there's a mute button on the bottom left, and then it says microphone array, and it's the Real Tech R. That's the one I had to click to get the microphone working and the audio. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, I was talking to myself every few minutes, so thank you for telling me. Mayor and members of Aurora City Council, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Really excited to talk to you about what's going on at the airport, but also to talk about the great partnership that is happening between Aurora and the airport staff level and also on important regional issues. My name is Crystal Torres de Herrera, and I am the Chief of Staff and Executive Vice President for Denver International Airport. But before I jump into the presentation, I wanted to provide you with some relevant DEN updates. 2 weeks ago at this airport, we saw over 300,000 travelers go through TSA. This is record breaking for us, just even against 2019 numbers. So our passenger numbers here are really through the roof and the highest we've ever seen. And so to really facilitate that and make sure that we're thinking about our passengers and all the people who are traveling through DEN, we recently launched what's called DEN Reserve. And it's an ability for community members and travelers to actually reserve their slot in advance to go through the security line. So rather than showing up and being at the end of a very long line, which we all know can be stressful, they can instead utilize their reserved slot and just walk through security in a very seamless manner. So that is on the A Bridge where you can walk over to get to the A concourse. And so we're very excited about that and would urge all of you, we're happy to share information that you can share with your constituents, but certainly for anyone listening as well. It's a great opportunity to really just bypass a lot of the lines of security. I also just wanted to thank all of you for your ongoing partnership. Both Aurora and Den, we've worked together on a number of projects related to infrastructure and connectivity to better support both of our communities, and are really mindful of that close relationship and how we sit next to each other. And so just thank you for being such a critical partner, and we look forward to continue working with all of you on those issues and to support the Aerotropolis region. So let's go to the Den overview here, which is as many of you know, the airport is a city-owned enterprise, and so that means that we generate all of our own revenue. We are not on downtown Denver's general fund. And we are also the second largest airport in the world, 53 square miles, with room to expand up to 12 runways. We are currently at 6 runways right now. Next slide, please. So done by the numbers, and this is really interesting when you think about how fast Denver International Airport has come roaring out of the COVID-19 pandemic. As you can see here, we've got over 23 airline partners, over 200 nonstop destinations, with over 25 international destinations serving 15 countries. And we are always looking to expand that. As you all are aware, we are really trying to get a flight to the continent of Africa. We know how important that is. And, this has been a really great area of partnership between all of you and the Ethiopian and other communities, particularly in Aurora, to help us make that business case. So thank you all for that. In addition, we have over 1,200 companies working at Den. Many of them are small businesses that also come from Aurora, with over 37,000 badged employees, helping us contribute over $33 billion to Colorado annually. We were the 3rd busiest airport in the world in 2022 based on passenger numbers, and it's interesting because prior to the pandemic, we were in the teens in terms of being the busiest airport. And so it just shows how fast this airport recovered, even faster than many of the other airports on the coast like LA or New York. And so when you look at that purple ribbon on the bottom, passenger numbers, last year we beat the number of passengers that we saw in 2019. And we're actually projecting that we're going to continue to grow quickly as we head into and close out 2023. Next slide, please. So Vision 100, as we think about Den being ready to serve and our passenger numbers really growing, we're really mindful that we are projected to hit 100 million annual passengers quickly. And we've always projected that we may hit that around 2032, but we actually may hit that even sooner than expected. So this is our strategic plan to prepare the airport, our workforce, and all the businesses that we do business with and our partners to be ready to be able to serve 100 million annual passengers. And so everything in the orange ribbon are what we call our guiding principles. And so you'll see there sustainability and resiliency. Phil Washington really wants Denver International Airport to be the greenest airport in the world. We are working on several initiatives to do that and to make sure that we make that a reality. We are actually going to have the largest solar array in the city of Denver that will be operational next year. And so things like that, plugging our oil and gas wells, really being thoughtful about how we can be green is very important to us. Equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. Also, something that we want every member of our team, every frontline worker, everybody who does business at Den to think about: how are we living that value? How are we embedding that in everything that we do? And this is an area where we are really trying not just to lead at Den, but in the industry, aviation overall on a global stage. And so you'll hear me talking about that and what we're doing on that front a little bit later. Operational excellence. People have to know that when they come here, it's going to be safe, it's going to be secure, and that, we really can perform as an airport. And so that is something that we can keep in mind as well. And then, of course, everything we can do is about the people we serve, the passengers, how can we be thoughtful about what it feels like to them to come through Den, and make sure that everyone from all walks of life feels like this is their airport, they feel welcome, and that they can have a positive experience here. Underneath that orange ribbon, you see different pillars. And these are things that show how we do the work in terms of envisioning Vision 100. And it's no accident you'll see that pillar number 1 is about people. Because we know that this place, we can have all the desires and goals we want, but if we're not taking care of our people and giving them the tools to succeed, we're going to come up short. And so this is everything ranging from making sure that we've got a workforce leadership strategy to help grow our team members, to make sure that they know how do they continue to thrive at Den, and not just the city employees, but all the employees in the ecosystem. What are their career pathways? How do we retain that incredible aviation talent that is here? We've also established a Center of Equity and Excellence in Aviation. It is the first of its kind in the aviation industry. And you'll hear me talk about what we're doing there in a little bit. And then, of course, employee innovation. As we all know, the people who do the jobs, the frontline employees who actually do their jobs day in and day out, they are the ones who best know how to cut the red tape, how to eliminate duplicative steps. How do we make sure that we're making their jobs as seamless as possible for them? And then, of course, growing our infrastructure, recognizing that while Den may be the youngest airport in the US air system, we still need to grow. And there's still things that we need to do. And so that's everything from completing our major projects, updating our master plan, to making sure that we're being thoughtful about how we partner with you and other neighbors, but how we develop the land around us and being strategic so that we're really leveraging that economic development, that growth, and really planning for the future. And then, of course, maintaining what we have, making sure that when you or others come through Den, the escalators work, the walk-elators work, that we're really taking care of everything that we have, and that we are staying at the forefront, not waiting for something to break down, but really trying to be proactive and identify things that need maintenance and delivering that maintenance on a regular schedule to try to avoid things from breaking down and impacting passengers. And then, of course, pillar 4, expanding our global connections, right? Continuing to really look for how we can really bring in new flights. We are really mindful that we are Colorado's port to the world. And how do we really leverage all the interests of the surrounding communities and make sure that we really do that well? Next slide, please. So you heard me talk about, we think we're going to hit 100 million annual passengers around 2032. We may even hit it sooner just based on the numbers we are seeing right now and our projections just even for this year. And so again, this just shows how fast, Den continues to grow from a passenger volume. And this is this is like going to the doctor and getting your blood pressure. And it's a good vital for us. It shows that things are healthy, but that we are going to continue to grow. Next slide, please. So I also thought it was important to talk about the different touch points between Den and the city of Aurora. As you can see here, we have close to 9,000 employees who reside in Aurora. And that's no surprise, given the proximity and us being right here, right next door. And we have over 115 Aurora firms that are certified to do business with the city and county of Denver. We've got 81 contracts that we have given to Aurora certified firms, with 21 Aurora certified firms on those contracts and an additional 20 on what we call our ACDVE program, which is a specific aviation type of designation. And that's not easy to get. So that's really important that Aurora's got that number of firms that are in the ACDVE program that do business at Den. And then currently we have 4 ACDVEs that are currently on concession contracts at Den. So that's like our food and beverage and our kiosks. And, we are really mindful about, even though these numbers are great, how do we continue to leverage bringing in more of the local businesses and continuing to really create those opportunities for Aurora businesses and local businesses. And so the Commerce Hub, which you see here, and happy to connect any of you with them, they are really in place to help businesses who may either be new to Den or, have only done some work at Den, really help them thrive, really help them navigate the aviation space here and learn how they can both expand their work at Denver at the airport and continue to pick up more business. Next slide, please. So this is an employee heat map that really kind of shows where, many of our employees come from, and you can see how many employees are coming from Aurora. And it just helps you get a snapshot of where in Aurora a lot of our employee base is coming from. And so we are happy after this to send any additional follow-up or information related to this if any of you want to dig a little deeper. Next slide, please. Going to go to empowering our people. And you heard me talk a little bit about this earlier. So let's go to the next slide, which is the Center of Equity and Excellence in Aviation, what we fondly call CIA. And so CIA, as you can see here, if you look at this, this is a picture of the Westin Hotel as you're coming in on the A line. And that red rectangle at the bottom, that is right underneath. If you come out to the Westin and you see that big open plaza, underneath it is approximately 70,000 square feet. And we were not using that space. And so we really thought it was important that if we want to be the epicenter of global aviation talent, which is what we're trying to do through CIA, that we have it on site, that it be easily connected to Den, public transportation, busing routes, all of that in the Hotel Transit Center. So what are we trying to accomplish with CIA? This is all about building aviation pipeline here in Colorado and the Rocky Mountain region. This is about not just putting Denver International Airport, but putting the Rocky Mountain region on the map globally for best-in-class aviation talent and aviation talent development. Why shouldn't the kids in Aurora who are growing up just a few minutes from the second largest airport in the world, why shouldn't they be seen as that next generation of aviation talent? They absolutely should. And so we really feel it's incumbent upon us to really create that framework, to create not just the lesson planning, and we are partnering with Aurora Public Schools. We're thinking about how do we embed aviation into the public school curriculum? How do we really develop that pathway for youth to come in and to actually have a career in aviation? We know these are high-paying jobs, and we want to make sure that we're creating that opportunity for the local students that live here and are around us. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as part of our efforts on equity, we are also doing what we call the Equity and Infrastructure Project. And this is something that CEO Phil Washington co-founded with John McCarty, who's the former Deputy Secretary of Transportation. And so this is also mindful of the fact that Den generates a ton of money in contracts. And we want to make sure that we're giving that out to small businesses as much as possible, making it as competitive as possible for them to come in and get these contracts. And so we took a really hard look as part of the Equity and Infrastructure Project about what was our baseline, where are our contracts going? And we made a commitment that we wanted to double the number of prime contracts awarded to historically underutilized businesses by 2025, as we did in 2021. And so we undertook a very thorough review of all of our contracting, who's got contracts, who doesn't, and have really started to put in place some really specific steps to try to achieve this. And what's also exciting is that this is something that not just Denver International Airport is doing, we are working across the United States with other transportation entities to also do this, because we recognize that as large transportation public institutions, that if we really want to help small businesses and help them create generational wealth, we have to work together to do that, and by doing programs like this. And so this is very exciting. It's not just in aviation, it's also in transit. We also have some of the water entities also involved. So it's really all modes of transportation working together to really try to create generational wealth and to try to give our small business community across the United States opportunities in all of infrastructure. Next slide, please. So speaking of infrastructure, to the next slide, we're going to talk about how we're growing our infrastructure. So as all of you are familiar and have come through the terminal, the terminal is under construction. But, that middle section where anyone who's flying United or Southwest knows, that section that has been renovated, it's so much easier now to move in and to work within that system. And so we are facing a reality where we know we're going to be serving 100 million annual passengers, and probably in less than 10 years. But yet our terminal was only built for 50 million annual passengers. So it's remodeling our kitchen while we're still living in the house, right? And trying to be as efficient as we can, make every dollar go as long as we can, to make sure that we are realigning and reconfiguring the space, not just to fit more people, but also to be safer and to be more secure and to make sure that we've got that state-of-the-art security equipment that we can process passengers through quickly. We also have that room to grow as we hit the 100 million annual passenger mark in the next few years, that passengers can move through here seamlessly. This is also really important as well because we have more airlines that want to fly to Denver International Airport. And the only way we're going to continue to bring in new carriers with new flights, new international flights, new domestic flights, is if we also have the room. And so this is also more efficient to fit additional airlines also in the terminal as well, which is going to be essential to providing those additional flights. Next slide, please. So one of the things that was so important and really helped us bounce back so fast was that during the pandemic, we continued to move forward on our infrastructure. We continued to move forward with our construction projects. It was like, hey, if people are not going to be here in the same amount of numbers, we got to just go. We got to take advantage of the opportunity and continue to go. And so last year, we opened up 39 new gates at Denver International Airport. That's like taking a mid-sized airport and dropping it in. And we did that by extending the concourses out. And so that has really been tremendous in terms of allowing us to also remodel that space, make it more modern, making sure that we have things like nursing rooms, comfortable seating, charging stations, updated restrooms, things that are really important to anyone who's passing through Den, but also giving us that extra room for growth, and adding those new gates and everything that comes with that. Next slide, please. So maintaining what we have, let's go to the next slide. So as you heard me say, we've got a very robust asset management program, but I'm going to run through some stats here to give you kind of a sense of the scope and scale of what it is that we're maintaining at Den. So we're maintaining over 8.2 million square feet because initially it was 7 million and then we added another 1.2 million as part of that gate expansion. So over 8 million square feet of space that we're maintaining just in that public facing space on the terminal and the concourses. We also have 6 runways, 5 at 12,000 feet and 1 at 16,000 feet. And I was just actually out on the airfield today. We were inspecting the concrete and the condition of the runways and taxiways, and it is a lot to take care of and to make sure that we are always making sure that it's safe for pilots to land. We've also got 300 lane miles of roadway. That's a lot. Kenya, people forget that Kenya is the entry point into the airport and how much that is. We've got over 34,000 parking spaces, including 6 public parking lots, and over 320 escalators, elevators, walk-elators, these things that have to go 24/7. They don't get a rest, right? Passengers are flying in and out at all hours of the night and making sure that they are in good working order. And then also making sure that we're replacing and upgrading those. And so we're replacing 90 of those by 2025. And then also all the restrooms, as you can see here, nearly 100. And we have a lot of plans to continue renovating those restrooms. We know that when passengers come to Den, they're going to do a few things. They're going to go through security. They're most likely going to go to the restroom before they get on their flight. And so we really want to make sure that it's clean, it's comfortable, it's modern. But again, going back to EDIA, accessible, really making sure that we're being thoughtful about, our passengers and our partners who come through Den who may have a disability and making sure that those restrooms and how they're set up can accommodate and be sensitive to that. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you may have and just really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Any questions? You know, I have one, and that is DIN purchasing, land in Adams County?
Sorry, Mayor, can you repeat that? It is pouring here and I've got a downpour and had a trouble hearing.
Sorry,
If you can
is,
repeat that.
is DIN purchasing land in Adams County?
So all the land that we are developing is currently already owned by Den. So we are not purchasing any new land. We do have land that under the 2016 IGA where there is a revenue share when development happens. And so as part of the build out, both for Aerotropolis and around our land, those are parcels that we are really eager to activate. And right now, you know, we've been really focused, including with your staff. I have to give Jason Batchelor and his entire team a huge shout out. They've been great partners, really thinking about how our land intersects and abuts each other, and making sure that we have the utilities, the infrastructure, and that if something has to go through Aurora Planning Department and Denver Planning Department, that we make it seamless and easy so we can attract developers, because we really want to activate those parcels, particularly that have a revenue share.
Any other questions?
Mayor Sundberg,
Councilmember Sundberg.
thanks for the presentation. Have you done anything to step up security patrols for catalytic converter theft and vehicle theft, which has been a problem at the airport?
Absolutely. No, great question. This is something where, again, Aurora's been a great partner. You know, we have DPD who is on site and patrolling. We've also brought in private security contractors to also monitor who's coming in and out of employee lots, but also install additional security cameras to try to have a sense and keep an eye on it. As you can tell from having 6 public parking lots and over 34,000 spaces, you know, we don't have the ability to see every space all at the same time, but we have absolutely tried to bring up more deterrence and are coordinating closely with law enforcement across the jurisdictions, right? Aurora, Adams County, Denver, because we know that if somebody's going to steal something, they're going to they're going to cross boundary lines, and they don't care. They're just trying to get out with whatever they took.
Further question?
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, just a comment. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I know we appreciate the partnership we have with Denver in terms of, you know, the economic impact that it has certainly brought to the Aurora region, our northeast area in particular. And we have a lot of people that work there. So thank you.
I appreciate that very much. We feel the same way.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate the update.
Thank you all so much. And we'd love to have you all out for a tour at some point. So let us know. We're happy to coordinate. And we wish you all the best, and thank you all. We very much value this partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
E470 update, Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And obviously, I am the representative on the board for E470 and vice chair of E470 board. So we just thought it was important to give an update on just the projects and operations of the E470 tollway. And, you know, we have so much of the tollway runs through, of course, Aurora. And so we've got a lot of projects that we have partnered with on those. So right now, just would like to turn it over to Bo Memory. He is the executive director for E470.
Thank you, Councilmember Bergen, and thank you so much to the city to allow us to update you on what's happening at E470 tonight. Again, my name's Bo Memory. I'm if you can't tell by my accent, I'm generally new to the region and to the position. I come to E470 from the North Carolina Department of Transportation, where I served as Chief Operating Officer, and before that, serving as the Executive Director of the North Carolina Turnpike Authority. To kick off our presentation, I'm going to turn it over to our board chair, Mayor Pro Tem of the town of Parker, John Dyack. John?
Thank you very much, Mayor Council. I appreciate the time. I'm John Dyack. I'm a town of Parker council member. Been a council member for 11 years. Speaking as a Parker council member, we certainly appreciate the collegiality that the city of Aurora has given the town of Parker over the years. I am also the chair of E470 at this point in time and like to give you a high level about us. E470 is a political subdivision created by the state legislature. E470 was formed in 1985, and we established the authority proper in January of 1988. We are locally owned and operated. That's sort of a good thing. We have a fantastic board, 8 voting members, as you see outlined. We also have 8 non-voting members. We operate the board under PHA law, which is a state law that was passed in 1987, which gave us the framework to move forward with E470 and building this tollway out. Our board works in a committee framework. I just like to provide kudos to Councilmember Bergen. She is vice chair. She is also chair of our roadway committee. We are undertaking a significant expansion of E470, and Councilmember Bergen's committee is in large part the driving force in making sure that that gets done and gets driven through to the board so we can expand accordingly. Next slide, please. The next slide, just a background. We're a 47-mile tollway. We were opened in 1991. The first segment was from I-25 to Parker Road. In my previous life, I was in the construction field, and we were on the design build team for E470. We were also doing a lot of work at DIA, so this is like old home week for me, being here and listening to Den's presentation. So we again opened numerous segments, and then in 2009 we converted to cashless tolling. So we have the express toll going that you have no ability to pay with cash. So that's a good thing. We're one of the first ones to do that. Again, user finance. We do not have any tax money coming to us. We are 100% self-finance. All the tolls that we collect go towards taking care of our debt, taking care of our capital improvements, and taking care of our operations. We have about $1.27 billion in outstanding bond debt. About $100 million a year goes to annual debt payments, and we are scheduled to pay off all of the debt in 2041. Next slide, please. This just kind of gives you a sense that the traffic trends of how we've grown through the years up until COVID, which is 2020. You can see the significant downward turn. I think at our low point, we were off 74% in terms of traffic. But as you see right now, we are quickly regaining our transactions, which I believe is a good thing and a function of all of our municipalities along the corridor growing robustly. Next slide, please. This slide just tells you how fiscally conservative we try to be at the authority. We recognize that our customers are constituents within Parker, within Aurora, and we try to be mindful and do things right for them. So in 2022, we were able to reduce tolls along the corridor. This was sort of unheard of, quite honestly. Most tolls or tolling entities increase their rates or continue to do so. We're at such a point where we can reduce and provide our customer and our constituents a little bit of reprieve. We also managed to freeze tolls in 2023 when everything was going up 9-10% in terms of inflation. So we are just trying to be mindful of our customers. We also eliminated some fees along the way. In 2018, the vehicle registration fee, that was an older fee to kind of get the E470 authority up and functional. It has served its purpose, so we dismiss and discharge that. So again, our constituents provided some sense of savings when they go to register their vehicles. We also eliminated the highway expansion fee in 2017. Next slide, please. And again, as Councilmember Bergen indicated, we certainly are partnering with municipalities and along the corridor. We recognize that we've grown up. In the early times, it was kind of touch and go, quite honestly. But we have matured, and we recognize that being a regional partner is very important. We have a couple of Aurora projects on there. Stephen D. Hogan Parkway, who was instrumental in E470's pass and getting us to where we be. We helped with that, and we also partnered with the City of Aurora and the 38th and 48th interchange. And with that, again, just thank you so much for the time, and we appreciate the support of the City of Aurora. Executive Director Memory, please.
Thank you, John. As John said, we are investing back in the corridor and in the communities here in the region. In this current 5 years, we anticipate investing roughly $500 million back into the corridor. And that includes our widening project that's happening right now, new interchanges to stay ahead of development and growth, and then technological advances which will help us improve the customer experience. Between now and 2040, we hope to invest at least $1.5 billion back into the corridor and the surrounding communities. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're in the midst of a widening project. I'm sure you've seen it and along the corridor if you've been north of I-70. Right now, we're widening 11 miles of the facility. We are widening it, adding a third lane in each direction, but building the bridges and to accommodate a fourth lane and eventually in each direction. We are also building new interchanges at 38th and 48th and expanding interchanges at 64th and Pena. And I'll talk a little bit here about our trail program. Next slide, please. 38th Avenue has moved, the interchange has moved along quite well. Here you see the bridge abutments and retaining walls. Next slide. And we just completed the girder erection in early July and just recently completed the deck, pouring the deck for that interchange. We hope to open that later this year. Next slide, please. The trails. We really do enjoy this program. We get great feedback from our customers and constituents. The High Plains Trail now has 12.5 miles, and with this expansion project, we're adding another 4 miles of trails. We love the fact that these trails interconnect with local trail systems to bring some interconnectivity along the corridor. And we'd like to enjoy continuing to partner on these trail programs as we move forward. Next slide. What's really core to what we do at E470 is our commitment to safety. We have made recent investments, you may have noticed, on the corridor in regards to our wrong-way vehicle program. We've added new backlit signs at our interchanges and along the main line of the corridor for the first time in an effort to stop people from getting on the facility in the wrong direction. We've also made important investments in cable barrier. Those barriers help stop crossover accidents, so folks going from the northbound and the southbound lane, and it also prevents them from bouncing back into traffic. And we've seen tremendous effect from this barrier style. We've also put in new deer fencing, and we continue to expand that to help those collisions. And you've probably seen our variable message signs. We try to get creative with that, and we are always open to suggestions. As we've heard from our customers, snow removal is a very important aspect of why they choose E470, and this winter was a great example of our commitment to that with the amount of trucks we had to put on the road and the amount of de-icer that had to be used. But all in all, we thought it was a very successful snow removal season. Next slide. And as members of the community, we take our environmental stewardship seriously. Just recently, we updated our electric vehicle chargers. We went from 2 chargers to 4. Those are open to all of the public, all of the members of the community. They are high-speed chargers, and if you've been out here recently, you probably had to stand in line to use one. They get quite a bit of use from members of the community. They are free and open to the public, and they're supported by our solar program. I got to know E470 many years ago from its groundbreaking work in solar. It's one of the first toll facilities in North America to put in solar arrays and to maintain that over the last decade. Next slide. And all of this leads to an impact, positive impact economically to both our customers and the communities we serve. As you see here in these numbers that come from right before the pandemic, we save people time. We save them money in terms of avoided accidents, and that time has a value to it. Next slide. We serviced almost 100 million transactions in 2022, answered almost 1 million calls, and we do that almost entirely from our headquarters here in the Aurora area. Our customers, we've been fortunate to get good feedback from our customers in general. And what we find interesting is in our most recent customer outreach, we found that the most important item to our customers was to keep the facility snow-free, and that the reason they choose E470 is that we save them time. With that, Mayor, Council, we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, well, thanks so much for your work, and thank you, Councilmember Bergen,
Thank
for
you, Mayor.
representing the City of Aurora on the E470 board. I know it's a lot of work.
And I just want to add that, a lot of our developers, Aurora Highlands and certainly West Side and others are appreciative also of the efforts that were made in funding some of the interchanges. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any objection to moving item number 2A and 2B forward from the consent calendar? Seeing none, item number 2A and 2B will move forward. Items from the policy committees, item number 3A.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't unmute quickly enough.
Okay, Councilmember.
I actually would like to review both items.
Very well. Item number 2A, Murphy Creek Industrial Metropolitan District, Cesarina Dancy, Senior Development Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Cesarina Dancy, Senior Project Manager, Office of Development Assistance. Item 2A is a new service plan proposal for the Murphy Creek Industrial Metropolitan District. This is located adjacent to E470 northwest of Gun Club in Mississippi. The plans are to serve a 70-acre industrial site with no residential proposed in this boundary, and the service plan and IGA that we received are in conformance with the model. I'm happy to answer any questions, and we also have council representation for the district here as well.
Questions of staff for the district?
Mayor?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, so I saw in the letter the justification for having no service plan, essentially not really telling us at all what's going to be there, was that we're going to get that soon, that there have been meetings with the Office of Development Assistance, pre-application meetings. So my concern is approving millions of dollars for an area that there's nothing there. It really just says there's going to be some development on these 70 acres and there will be about 2,000 people a day there. And that's all the information we have. So I do have concern about enabling millions of dollars of indebtedness with no plan at all.
Yeah, what the applicant stated in the letter is correct. They had a pre-application meeting. Those are vary as far as the detail, but regardless, it's not a formal submittal. It's my understanding they do plan to submit Q4 this year, but staff has seen their initial concept plan, and we've had some follow-up conversations. So to help fill in that blank, there have been some conversations, but no formal submittal.
Okay, so I just wouldn't be comfortable approving a Metro District service plan without any further information. That feels really sparse on information to me. But just that there have been conversations with staff, but that there's really no intent to even submit a plan until there's been a vote, basically, to improve the indebtedness, because that's Q4 of this year, is after the election. that would approve the indebtedness. So for me, I just don't think we should do something like that where we're gonna allow a vote to authorize the debt with no information forthcoming until after the fact.
So Serena, that's just the property owner is the electorate, right?
That's correct.
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, so from reading the backup, it's on the west side of E470 is my understanding, north of Mississippi. And so it would be commercial industrial, Cesarina, or would there be some residential component?
No residential. It's my understanding that it's light industrial. The property's currently zoned AD, which is airport district, which allows storage, distribution, warehousing, and then light manufacturing. So there's a variety of uses in that district that would fit what we commonly refer to as industrial.
Right, because it's near Buckley, so that's why the airport designation. So in terms of issuing debt, they're issuing debt to obviously to build the infrastructure needed for that future, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Further discussion?
Mayor.
Is there objection to moving item number 2A forward?
Yes,
Hey.
Mayor.
Oh, Councilmember Coon. Further objection?
What's happening here?
Item number 2A will move forward.
Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to speak, but you keep not recognizing me. So I also object to moving this forward.
Very well. Further discussion? Seeing none. Item number 2A will move forward. Item number 2B, First Creek, Powhatan Metropolitan District, numbers 1 through 12. Cesarina Dancy, you're up again.
Yeah, that's correct. So the First Creek Powhatan Metropolitan District numbers 1 to 12 have submitted a new service plan. This is a 981 acre site, and if I can read the description of the location, but it's probably more helpful to look at the map in the backup because it's not just super straight geometry on that. And this is proposed to be a mix of uses, both residential and commercial. And the residential population is expected to be 9,533. Their service plan and IGA are in conformance with the model. And likewise, we have had a pre-app on this property and many follow-up conversations as well, but no formal submittal. And the zoning is, they have a wide use of zoning currently. They have MUR, R2, MUA, and airport district. So I can't really speculate on the zoning changes, but they have a wide mix there for a wide variety of uses.
Questions of staff?
Mayor.
Councilmember Sundberg?
Nope, Marcano.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Cesarina, for the presentation. So I'm looking at all of our backup because I heard you say that there are vicinity maps and exhibits attached, and there do not appear to be. So that was going to be my first question, because I see this is a massive parcel. But
they are the maps are within the actual service plan, and I can point you to the exact page.
Yeah, it says that there's exhibits, but I'm looking through here in the PDF on eScribe. There are no maps anywhere on here. It's all text. There's the disclosures for home buyers, the breakdown. There's a couple of blank pages, but there are no maps. If any of my colleagues have seen the maps, could you please point me to where they're at? Because it's not showing up on any of those attachments for me.
On just this one?
Yeah. I found them in the previous one because they were in the service plan as where they're supposed to be, but yeah, they're not in here.
I'm scrolling as well. I can certainly follow up with that document if it's not appearing in this copy and make sure it's in there for the public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's 43 pages is what I have, so maybe there's a couple more that are supposed to be in there that just didn't make it somehow. But until I see those, I'm not comfortable moving this forward. Yeah, I mean, this is a massive parcel with a tremendous amount of potential debt that it could be issued. So I don't think it's in the interest of good government to move this forward until we have a complete presentation.
And there will be a complete presentation. Questions of staff?
Mayor,
Councilmember Coons.
I would just further point out that it looks like over $9 billion is when you combine all of these metro districts for about 10,000 residents. So we're spreading $9 billion. I'm sure some of that is also commercial tenants, but we're still talking about spreading $9 billion of indebtedness over what seems like maybe not. And again, it's a little sparse on the details because it's still in the pre-application phase. But I think it's our responsibility when we're approving metro districts to at least assure that the indebtedness can be repaid by what's being developed. And I don't think we have enough information. Just saying 10,000 people and $9 billion of indebtedness definitely does not indicate an ability to repay that debt. And we don't have the details on the rest of the activity that might justify that indebtedness.
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, I just have a question on the debt because I thought when they go out to the bond market for that allotment, whatever they're asking for, that the bond market then determines the viability of that debt. Like if they think there's no way, they want to give them 9 billion to borrow, they won't issue 9 billion. And then my other understanding is it is very rare since all the different laws have been put in place for a metro district to go under. I mean, I think that was maybe a case back in the 70s, and that's been, I thought, rectified. So I don't know if Jason or somebody from finance could opine on the debt question.
So I think what you're talking about is within the service plan, we also have a mill levy cap on debt service. And so that does, sort of keep a cap on how much debt can actually be issued in terms of the assessed valuation, and also keeps a cap on what a individual property owner would see in terms of the maximum of the debt that they would, the debt service that they would see.
Right, but if they're asking for 9 billion, that's not our decision, right? That is the bond market.
Well, again, they're asking for 9 billion of authority. What they'll do is eventually go out, and then they actually have to go to the bond market and then issue the debt. And then the amount of debt that they're going to be able to issue is depending upon the valuation that's in the ground, and then the debt service mill levy cap. So those two things are going to work to provide a cap on how much the market will bear and in terms of issuance of debt by the Metro District.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there objection to moving 2B forward?
Mayor, I object.
Councilmember objects. Councilmember Coons objects.
Yes.
Further objection. Item number 2B will move forward. Item number 3A, revision to exhibits A and D of the operator agreement with Axis Exploration Limited Liability Corporation Company. Jeffrey Moore, Manager, Energy and Environmental Division.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Jeffrey Moore. I'm the manager of the Energy and Environment Division for the city. I'm going to share my screen. I'll give you a brief overview of this agenda item, and then I'll introduce the applicant to provide some additional details. And just confirming you can see the slides here. All right, very good. This item is Axis Exploration and the city's operator agreement with Axis and the amendments of exhibits A and D. Those exhibits are the map and the spreadsheet of wells that are associated with the approved well sites in this operator agreement. A little bit of background, the operator agreement was signed with Axis Exploration in July of 2019. It vested 4 well sites with a total of 80 wells. None of those wells or well sites have been constructed to date. The operator agreement does allow revisions to the wells and well sites after a public hearing at City Council. And Axis is requesting changes to the well sites that are all within the same geographical area and targeting the same minerals as what was originally described in the operator agreement. To give you a basic overview here, the map on the screen is 64th Avenue and the intersection of E470. In the yellow polygons, you can see the 4 well sites that were originally approved in the Axis agreement. From left to right, those are the High Point, the Hammer, the ACP East, and the ACP West. Axis is requesting to remove 2 of those sites, the Hammer and the ACP East, and to add 1 new site, which would be called the Deuce. And they're changing the name just to, it's essentially the ACP East that's shifting to the north, but they're renaming it so that it's not confusing here in the proceedings. So removing 2 sites and adding a 3rd site. Our division has reviewed this proposal. We are supportive of the changes that are being proposed. We've also confirmed support by the surface owner as well as the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee. Their letter will be included in the packet for the public hearing if this item is moved forward this evening. There are some benefits to the city of the proposed changes. It reduces the total surface impact of oil and gas within the city. It cancels a site that was adjacent to the floodplain, and it would have been less than 2,000 feet from future residences in the Windler homestead. Also cancels a site that's was scheduled to be west of E470, and it provides greater protection for public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dan Harrington with Civitas Resources, and he will provide some additional details, and then we'll both be available for any questions that you may have. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Moore, and good evening, Mayor and council members. Appreciate the chance to present this to you tonight. If you could go to the next slide. We'll run through a quick summary of the proposal, an overview map, what the updated exhibits A and D will look like, a detail map, and also talk briefly about some legacy well reentries that we will pursue in the area. Next slide, please. As Mr. Moore alluded to, we're seeking an amendment to the Axis Aurora operator agreement. We'd like to add 1 new site with 18 wells and eliminate 2 offset sites originally approved for a total of 40 wells. So the net effect on the operator agreement and development plan will be 1 fewer site and 22 fewer wells. This is made possible by advances in drilling technology that allow us to drill farther from fewer sites, reducing surface impacts in the area. The new site will be called the Deuce site, and we're requesting it under Section 7B2 of the operator agreement, which does allow the addition of new sites. No changes are proposed to any of the contractual language within the operator agreement. We've agreed to construct the Deuce site and spud the wells within 3 years of the effective date of this amendment. The default for the agreement is 5, but the Oil and Gas Department asked us to pursue a 3-year limit, and we agreed. We're also asking for an exemption to the requirement for produced water takeaway by pipeline, which is in the operator agreement, for the Deuce well site, allowing for trucked produced water takeaway during the production phase. This is consistent with what is done at other sites in Aurora and elsewhere in the county. Go to the next slide, please. This is the overview map where we're looking. The pink box is the general outline of the Axis operator agreement. The sites are shown in pink here, including the legacy sites as well as the added Deuce site. And we'll get into the details of where we are, but generally speaking, we're south of DIA, east of E470. Next slide, please. This is the detail map of what we're proposing. What you see on the south side here, the ACPE was the original site. We feel the Deuce well site has some advantages over this. It accommodates more wells than the original ACPE site, which will allow us to eliminate an additional offset site, the Axis Hammer site, for 32 wells, which is very close to E470 to the west. We've dramatically improved the setback from nearby Second Creek, which is an Mile High Flood District designated stream. The setback from ACPE is 80 feet, whereas the setback from the Deuce is 950 feet. We'll also be farther away from the upcoming residential development south of 56th Avenue. 56th Avenue is shown at the south edge of this map here. We will be drilling 4-mile wells from this due site. That's part of what allows us to eliminate some of the offset sites. We have consulted extensively with a surface owner, and this does fit within their development plans. Next slide, please. So if this amendment moves forward and is approved, this is what the updated exhibits A and D will look like. As you can see, the hammer and ACP East will be eliminated, the due site will be added, and the exhibit D is simply a tabular form of the same. Next slide, please. There are also a number of legacy vertical wells, so non-Civitas wells that were plugged at some point in the past in the area. As part of this this development, we're going to evaluate all of these legacy wells, totaling 18 in the area, and replug them if necessary. We've already done 2. We have 4 on the schedule for 2023. There are another 7 we fully anticipate will require reentry and replugging, and there are another 5 that are still to be evaluated. Replugging the wells is a benefit to the community as it prevents any future issues with wells that may have been plugged to non-2023 standards in the past. Thank you.
Questions of staff or Civitas?
Mayor.
I'm sorry. Who is it? Councilmember.
Yeah, so I do see that this does extend the time frame during which drilling is permitted, not to the full extent that would be allowed, but what would happen to those wells that are supposed to be drilled by 2024 if we were to take no action today?
Thank you, Councilmember Coombs, for the question. In terms of the timeframes for the approvals, the original operator agreement provided 5.5 years total for the wells to be drilled. That deadline was December 31st of 2024. So we're 4 years into those 5.5. There's a 1.5 years remaining on the original approval in the operator agreement. As Dan mentioned, the operator agreement provides for 5 years on new well sites. However, our division requested that they consider only 3 years, which they're agreeing to. That would extend the 1.5 years that's left by an additional 1.5 years, totaling 3 years. In terms of the wells, if they're not drilled by that point, I believe the operator agreement may allow an opportunity for the operator to request extension. I have to review that. We typically deal with the Crestone Peak operator agreement in most detail. But if they're not drilled by that point, then they would not be allowed to be drilled.
Further questions?
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
So, but this is allowing us or Civitas to reduce the number of wells, right? And then also move some of them further away from where potential development. And requires them to replug all the wells. So I guess on the time frame, it seems like even though we're extending that a little bit, what we're benefiting from is reduced well pads, correct?
Yes, Councilmember Bergen, that's correct. We would have a fewer number of well sites, fewer number of wells, and the replugging of the old wells is a significant benefit to the city and to the development community. When we have a developer come into an area where there is an older plugged well, that means a well that was drilled or may have produced in the 70s or even earlier, and it's now cut off below the ground surface and plugged. The standards 50 years ago were not what the standards are today in terms of the amount of cement that must be used to plug the wells and other considerations. And so getting these wells replugged up to modern standards is a huge benefit for both the city and the development community as well, frankly.
Yeah, I see it as a safety issue. Thank you.
You're
Further
welcome.
questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So I guess are you not on track then to be able to drill the current wells that you have approved?
Who's that directed to?
To the applicant or to Jeffrey, I guess, if he could summarize for them.
The sites currently ensconced in the access operator agreement are not fully permitted at the city or state at this time. But we can proceed those through the permitting process per the access operator agreement as it stands now.
Councilor Hartcove.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jeffrey if he can just get the answer, the fuller answer to that question before council.
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3A forward? Seeing none, item number 3A will move forward. Item number 3B, Police Reserve Force, the council member, Jurenski.
Thank you. So this was a request brought forward by the police department to be able to revamp the tactical medic program for our SWAT team. In working with the city attorney's office, we concluded that the best approach to this was bringing back the reserve police force ordinance that was taken out of code in 2005. And because this allows more protection for the city and for the firefighters. And with that, Pete.
Thank you, Councilmember Jurenski. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As Councilmember Jurenski stated, we used to have a reserve police force in the city of Aurora back at the turn of the century when the police department was fully staffed. The reserve ranks dwindled down to near zero, and so in the big toad cleanup in 2005, the reserve ordinance was removed from statute, so from the code. So when we started talking about revamping the tactical medic program, when Councilmember Jurenski brought that to the city attorney's office, looking at the liability perspective of it, we realized that the tactical medics that were assigned to the SWAT team before were actually just having concealed carry weapons. And that scared me, right? It's like, wait a minute, if they're with the SWAT team and they're armed and they get into a use of force incident, I want to be able to protect the firefighters, right, our paramedics, and part of my client being the city, protect the city as well. So I'm aware of the Peace Officer Standards and Training. The Post Board actually has a reserve certification. And this isn't anything that's new. Several states, a lot of sheriff's departments in Colorado and across the country utilize reserves. It's a way to bring people that have unique skill sets to assist the police department, yet they don't have time to be full-time police officers. So with that reserve certification, as of July 1, Post increased the amount of hours to be able to be awarded that certification. It's a little over 6 weeks if you do it based on a 40-hour week versus a regular academy, which is 6 to 9 months, depending on which academy you attend. So what in essence this will do is if these paramedics, we've talked to Chief Otten with the fire department, they're actually on board with this because again, of the protection. They would be sent to this 6-week academy, and Highlands Ranch Law Enforcement Academy and Flat Rock Law Enforcement Academy are the academies that actually offer the reserve training curriculum. Our academy doesn't, and the Arapahoe County Academy doesn't, because it takes just like we're accredited by Post for our regular full-time academy, we'd have to go through that process, and we haven't done that yet. So we would send those. We have 4 paramedics that have been identified to do that. They would go over, they would get certified, and basically what this ordinance does and what is required by state law is the chief of police, they serve, any reserve officer would serve at the pleasure of the chief, but based on the rules promulgated, the policies and procedures by the police department. And so in essence, the rules and policies would dictate when a reserve police officer actually has the authority of a full-time officer. Generally, those individuals just reserve certifications can only act as a regular police officer, when they're allowed to by policy of the police department, and they're being supervised or directed by a full-time post-certified officer. So an example of the SWAT medic program, of course, it would be with our SWAT team. They are fully certified peace officers. They would be in their control, and they would act as peace officers when they were in uniform, training and so forth. But if they were, for example, one of the questions that we got was from one of our doctors, if they wanted to go through one of our academies and become a reserve officer, would they be required to follow all the post rules in the ER? no, because we're not going to authorize a doctor to work in the ER, as being authorized peace officer during that time. It's only when they're working in the areas where we are outlining, we will outline in a policy at the police department. And as I've worked on this, I have learned, I actually had lunch with Sheriff Brown today of Arapahoe County. Their South Metro fire paramedics that are assigned to their SWAT teams, they also have reserve certifications by post, and they are allowed to act as peace officers when they're with the SWAT team. And there's other things too. So this isn't just limited to paramedics. I know Councilmember Jurinski has talked about there are some officers that have retired that would like to give back to the police department. And this would give them a way to fill a civilian role with the police department where we could do a part-time type role, but then carry their commission as an officer. And because they were fully post-certified at one point, state law does allow the police chief to say, hey, because you're fully post-certified, you can act as a peace officer at all times, just like if you were a full-time officer. So there's a lot of things that I think with people with specialized skills could bring to the Aurora Police Department. And be clear, this doesn't count against civil service. They cannot get paid for explicitly the work as a reserve police officer. They can be in another role like a paramedic or a civilian investigator, and that's their status, right? They're commissioned as a reserve police officer. So with the protections that come and the requirements of state law. And I'll ask any questions. I don't know if Chief Acevedo, if he's on. I had talked to him. I don't want to speak for him, but he is in support of this ordinance.
And I am on and absolutely support it.
Further questions or comments?
I have one.
Councilmember Bergen.
And I apologize if it was already asked. I know they don't get paid, they don't get city benefits or anything like that. Are they covered by qualified immunity?
Yeah, so the state law requires the city to provide workers' compensation insurance and to protect, and we would cover them in any civil action like any other police officer, because they would be acting in the full capacity of an Aurora police officer if they're on duty pursuant to our policies and procedures. So yes. Now, again, and it's like splitting hairs, right? So let's say our paramedic is a reserve police officer. They're going to get a stipend to be assigned to the SWAT team, right? But we're not paying them for the reserve certification. We're paying them as a firefighter or paramedic assigned to the SWAT team. I know it looks like it's splitting hairs, but that's what the law requires. If we had a volunteer that came off the street and said, hey, I want to be a reserve for the police officer or for the police department, I've got my reserve certification, and we wanted to hire that person, and they wanted to go work patrol, they'd have to work with another full-time officer, but we wouldn't pay them for that because that is their only job. They wouldn't be otherwise an employee of the city.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah. So if these folks are post-certified, they're reserve officers, but they may only operate under the command of APD. I guess my concern is around kind of the accountability that's also provided by civil service. Where would these individuals fall within that framework for accountability for their actions while operating as reserve police officers?
So they would be, again, they would go through the same hiring process, right, as regular officers. They have to go through the same background, same polygraph, same everything that we do, right, at the police department as far as laterals go. And they would be required to follow our policies and procedures. The issue about when they can act as a peace officer is more if they're off duty, right? Let's say, a fully commissioned peace officer, if they're off duty and a felony happens right in front of them, they can take action as a peace officer because it's occurring in front of them. And a person with just a reserve certification, they're just a civilian. If they're not in the role of the reserve police officer as dictated by the PD's policy, they don't have any more authority than a civilian. So there is a lot of protection there as far as the policies and the procedures and what happens. And again, if we have an individual who is a reserve police officer that doesn't want to follow our policy, they get terminated. We send a submission to post, and they remove them from our roles, and we don't have to deal with them anymore.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Pete, for that. You touched on some of what I'm concerned about, but I have a lot of heartburn about this. If we have a reserve officer who violates someone's rights, how does that impact them? What kind of liability would they have? What would that do to the person that they are under the command of? And what kind of liability would that person have? And then ultimately, how would the city be involved in something like this? Would we have to indemnify that individual as we would any of our civil service? Could you walk me through that?
Yeah, so let me tell you the answer that you guys all love, every lawyer that says it depends, right? So one of the issues with the reserve certification, right, is they have to be under the supervision of a full-time officer. So if something is going south, it's not going to be the reserve officer by him or herself, right? They're having to deal with that. There would be other full-time officers involved. So it'd be a much bigger issue, right? I will tell you that over the generations that police departments have had reserve officers, a lot of that can be controlled by policy and procedure. And I'll tell you, there are some reserve officers that will go and on their own time go through field training, right? They want to go work patrol. They go through field training. They pass all their the FTEP program. They get out and they can work by themselves because the sergeant is supervising them. They would be under the same, again, with the background checks and everything else. And I know Chief Acevedo can hop on this too. We're not going to hire people that would hopefully put us in this situation, but that's more of a, I know, I see your face there, Councilmember Roncana, but that is a good issue, but I think we can do that with training, selection, and policy and procedure.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember Conley.
Thank you, sir. So thank you, Pete, for that. I mean, of course, I assume y'all would not be wanting to hire folks who are going to get us into trouble, but the fact remains that we have had folks who get us into trouble. And I know that, you know, I'm very interested in finding ways for civilians to support our sworn officers. Like I like the traffic enforcement program that we have going, or not enforcement, but the traffic response program that we have going. I think there's other opportunities like that. This one, I just feel like, talk me off the ledge here. Like what guarantee do we really have that this isn't going to backfire on our existing sworn or the city?
So, and again, what I can do is look at history. This isn't a new issue, right? This isn't something that we're doing for the first time. Even the city of Aurora had a reserve program before, but every sheriff's department has one, and you wouldn't even know. I mean, the uniforms look identical. They have to follow the same policies, the same procedures, the same law. So Senate Bill 217, right? Every officer would have to follow that. We would have to follow that. So we would be looking, if an officer, again, I'm going to throw this out there that I think is rare that this could happen. But again, as you say, Councilmember Marcano, anything could happen. If we have a reserve officer that goes crazy, right, does something, then we'll make the same decision that we do every other officer, whether or not we think they acted in good faith, right? And so the same protections that the city would otherwise have, we have with reserve officers, just like we have with full-time officers. And I see Chief just came on. So, Chief.
Mayor, may I add to that?
Please proceed.
Councilmember, I think our priority is going to be number one, our firefighters. This is a model that's worked across the country and it is the best practice. And it's to protect the firefighters themselves and the city from liability. We want people that don't just have a concealed hand license, but actually have some training as a police officer. So that's going to be a win-win for the city and for our employees. In terms of accountability for those firefighters, they're still civil service members of the fire department. So they're going to be subject to disciplinary or review of their actions by their own department and ultimately the city. And for the part that I think Councilmember Jurenski talked about, the reserve officers that are retirees, all of those people are going to be people that were that left in good standing with a good work history and a very long history of proper service. So we wouldn't be bringing back anyone to perform some of the not frontline, but maybe some of the support, which is somewhat of a civilian slash reserve officer program. So I think that the program itself was it's not like LAPD where they have just hundreds of reservists that have never been police officers that actually go out and work patrol on a regular basis. It's going to be more of a measured and I think more of a focused program that meets the needs of the city.
Further questions or comments?
Okay.
Mayor. I'm sorry. Who's
Medina.
that? Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, just a question on, so do you think that this puts any ongoing issues around training? That these people are doing dual roles? And when do they know that they're a police officer, not a paramedic or a firefighter? I mean, who makes that distinction?
Well, when they respond to a scene, well, SWAT team, they're actually on call. There's actually a schedule. They will specifically be acting as peace officers. They won't be acting as peace officers when they're in a fire engine or, some other vehicle for the fire department. They're only peace officers and they respond in their role as SWAT medics, or SWAT callouts. So it'll be very clear to them. Same thing if we were to have like a professional doctor, like a trauma doc, which is, we like having trauma docs as SWAT medics, because quite honestly, that's probably the best trained person in the city is a trauma doc, and it provides them with protections. And again, it provides our city with protections to have this higher standard of training and certification.
Further questions or comments? Is there any objection to moving 3B forward? Seeing none, item number 3B will move forward. 3C, FISR committee update, Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to pass this on to Liz to give all of the updates that we had from our last committee meeting, and I think Liz is on. I think we have 3 sub items.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. I'm Liz Rogers, the Intergovernmental Relations Manager for the city. So included in the backup are details of the actions and items the committee has taken on the May 5th and June 16th meetings. As Councilmember Lawson mentioned, there are 3 items to update on. So the first, there were 2 items of federal legislation discussed and approved as actively support. These are Senate Bill 870, Fire Grants and Safety Act, which would reauthorize through fiscal year 2030 the U.S. Fire Administration, the Assistance to Firefighters Grants Program, and the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response Grant Program. And the city has received these grants in the past. The other bill is Senate Bill 1514 and House Resolution 3170, Homes for Every Local Protector, Educated and Responder, or the HELPER Act. This act would create a home loan program within the FHA to help law enforcement officers, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, and pre-K through 12 teachers by having some mortgage assistance programs that will be developed. The second item you can find on page 240 of the backup. The committee also approved a high-level list of state priorities for the city to pursue legislative action during the interim work period over the summer before the 2024 session. These proposed priorities were identified based on the 2023 state priorities approved by the City Council, along with input from internal staff, our lobbying team, and issues that arose during the 2023 legislative session. The priorities are areas where staff and city lobbyists will seek to work alongside our state electeds to address some of these areas of concern. Specific focus will be given to affordable housing and homelessness, as well as public safety, to find interested sponsors for these issues and potentially draft some legislation. In this, our goal is to work with our legislators during the interim period to address city concerns and take a proactive approach. If there are any additions to this document that you would like to see, please let me know. And then lastly, the lobbying team presented an end of session report on legislation the city took positions on, and Adam County presented as well to the committee regarding their use of ARPA funds. Both of these presentations are included in the backup. So thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions of staff for Councilmember Lawson? Seeing none, thank you for, Councilmember Lawson.
Sorry, Liz, there seems like there was an item here in the backup about city positions. Was that an error to be in here, or?
Are you referring to the priorities list on page 240?
Okay, I thought it was regarding how we're going to be doing future positions. Is that not?
Well, that will be coming at a future study session date.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the error.
No problem.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, that was for information only. Item number 3D, Flex Fund Update, Homeless Services, Emily Fuller, Homeless Program Coordinator.
Hi all, I'm going to be pulling up the presentation here in just a moment. My name is Emily. Thank you all for allowing me to share some information this evening. This presentation is on some updates for our flexible housing fund that we run out of the homeless programs. So go ahead to the next slide, please. So what is the Flexible Housing Fund? The purpose of it is to remove financial barriers that households face to maintain or secure permanent housing in our high-cost, low-vacancy rental market, to support households that don't fit the qualifying criteria of existing funding streams. And this assists with our community's goal of engaging in homelessness prevention and making homelessness brief, rare, and non-recurring. And this funding comes from the 2% recreational marijuana tax revenue. Next slide, please. So how to apply for this fund is clients, community members living in Aurora must be working with a case manager who has completed our Flex Fund training. Trainings are hosted at least once a month, typically on the first Monday, but we're pretty flexible. It's hosted online and doesn't take super long. So once a group is kind of gathered and ready to take it, we can pretty much schedule whenever. And the application portal opens the following Monday, so the second Monday of every month. And right now we're seeing our funding run out in about 24 hours. This is a pretty high demand fund, and we are one of the only people that offer this type of money right now. Next slide, please. So just looking at what we've seen so far, this is from January through June. The July data has not been entered yet, just based on the timeline of submitting it to you all. So the total that we've spent so far is 249,000 and some, and we've had about 278,000 and some requested. So we've been able to approve 113 applications out of a total of 166 that were submitted. Typically, we are seeing applications be denied based on folks applying that don't live in the city of Aurora, their applications not being complete or missing some documents, and if we run out of money and they just happen to submit after that fiscal limit has reached, then we'll deny and ask them to apply the following month. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So kind of comparing that to what we saw last year, 2022, from January to December, there was a total of 466 applications submitted, with 321 of those approved. The total requested was just shy of 900,000, and the total spent was 582 and some, 582,000 and some. So you can see we're kind of sort of on track to hit those similar numbers, maybe a little bit less. Go ahead to the next page, please. Okay. So right now, the application categories that we've seen so far is security deposits in a first month is about 70 applications, rental arrears on a current unit, about 56, relocation or a family reunification when we're buying a bus ticket for someone to move to another state, 15, rental arrears on a past unit, 10, utility assistance, 5, one-time move-in costs of things like holding fees or storage, or not storage, but like moving companies, there we go. And then hotel or motel is about 2 applications, and then application fees are 2. You can apply for more than one category, so that's why these numbers don't add up to my previous slide. We see a lot of folks applying for their application fees and their security deposit in one. And one thing to note about our hotel and motels is you have to have a permanent unit lined up with a lease ready to go. So if we had somebody sign a lease with the start date of August 1st, we could pay for a hotel from now until then based on these funds, but without that permanent household, the permanent unit lined up, we would not be able to do a hotel or a motel at this time. Next slide, please. So like I said, to apply for this fund, you have to use a case manager that's been trained. These are a list of some of the organizations that have participated in the training. We have about a little bit more than 200 actual case managers, so tons of people within the city and even bleeding into like Denver can access this fund. So you can see like the counties, the housing authority, Salvation Army, the school districts. We've got tons of folks trained in using this fund. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Right now, we're getting our most frequent applications from the Aurora Housing Authority, Mile High Behavioral Health Care, so that includes Comitis and the Aurora Day Resource Center. and Colfax Community Network, Aurora Mental Health and Recovery, the Salvation Army, so the pallet shelters, and AD Works. Next slide, please. So some other data points that I wanted to highlight. So far this year, we've seen 81 applications from single parents, and 37 of these applicants were experiencing literal homelessness before this funding. So I think those are some pretty important numbers just to highlight. Go on to the next slide, please. So right now for our monthly spending, like I said, the fund opens on the second Monday of every month, and we have about $40,000 per month to spend, and it runs out pretty quickly, first 24 hours, and then we typically have to close it. Like I said, right now it's pretty unique with this type of funding that we are able to offer, and it's in such high demand. Previously, agencies were able to kind of rely on this as an emergency, but right now it takes a little bit more of planning, and case managers are having to do a lot of work on the back end to make sure that they are ready to go when the portal opens. And it's almost like a race just because the funding is moving so quickly. Next slide, please. So some other flex funding in the Denver metro area. Arapahoe County does have funding for eviction prevention, rehousing, and other housing related expenses. Right now, residents of Aurora are not able to access that funding. So it's only for folks that are in Arapahoe County, but not Aurora. And then Metro Denver Homeless Initiative has a fund nearly identical to ours. They take applications from all of the counties and regions in this area. Next slide, please. And then another thing to highlight, we recently received $30,000 from Community Solutions, which will be dedicated to veterans experiencing homelessness in Aurora. This funding can't duplicate services from the VA or the VOA or any of the folks providing the services already. It has to be something, it has to fill a hole. So we're thinking that funding right now could go towards like car repairs, landlord incentives, or other barriers to housing that these other organizations are not able to pay. Next slide, please. And that is all that I have. So thank you for your time, Mayor and council members. If you have any questions or comments or anything.
Let me comment, then I'll go to Councilmember Lawson. And that is, I think that this is a very effective program. And I reached out to State Senator Field to see if we can, if the state could help so that we could provide a more permanent funding source in addition to what we're already doing. But it's pretty amazing to, particularly for, I've seen it in one particular case, a single parent mom who, lost her job temporarily because of COVID and was living paycheck to paycheck. And this program was able to provide her with 30 days in a motel. And then was able to provide her with security deposit and first month's rent to get a place, and she was able to keep her. The family was able to stay housed, and she was able to stay employed. And further questions or comments? Awesome.
Thank you, Emily. I have a question for you. So I definitely think this is a good fund because actually, a lot of people are facing eviction. I know I recently sent over something. I didn't do a council request. A lot of the eviction stuff I sent it over immediately, where it was a woman and some kids about to get evicted. So the only concern I have on that, with that kind of emergency, although I don't know if I haven't gotten an update yet, so I hope I get an update on this. I don't think she has a case manager. So in these kind of cases where we're sending over these kind of real emergency, because this deals with kids, the one that I just sent over, do you put them with a case manager automatically? I mean, they don't have a case manager, and they're kind of in an emergency situation, especially when kids are involved. I find, where they can all be kicked out and be unhoused, that's very disturbing to me. So can you just tell me, do you assign, when we send something like that over to housing and community, I know you assess the situation, do you automatically assign a case manager so they can apply?
We don't necessarily automatically assign, but we do let them know where they can find a case manager. And in situations like that, what we have done is, if I'm going to refer someone to the Connection Center at the Salvation Army, is I'll also contact them on the back end if it's a situation like this and ask them to kind of look out for that. The other piece of this that I should have mentioned that makes things a little bit harder is this fund does require that you have income. That way you can sustain your rent following. And maybe in the future, once our outreach team gets kind of going, maybe that would be the case manager that we can kind of assign them to, if that is something that falls within their job duties once that team is built out.
That's because this particular person, I'm not trying to bring up the case, she's in a job training program.
Yes.
And it commences for 2 months. And so now this person is in a situation here that's trying to finish up a program, but then she could be evicted, and that's going to stop her from doing the program because she might possibly be unhoused. It's just a real, yeah.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Lawson. I can speak a little bit, especially when there's families with children involved. What we'll usually do is connect them to the McKinney-Vento case managers, and they're with the school districts, and they usually have a lot more just cards in their deck and things that they can do. Emily's really good at calling folks and reaching back out and getting folks that warm handoff and connecting them directly. We do have that rule about needing the income in order to access this fund, and that's because we need to make sure that folks who are getting this very scarce resource that we have are going to be able to maintain their housing afterwards. Otherwise, they might just come back to us in another 2 months and be in an even worse situation because now they have an eviction on their record or something like that. So we're really trying to work with folks and get them into case management as best as we can. But, you know, like I said, it's a limited funding and we're trying our best to work with what we have.
Mayor?
Questions or comments, Councilmember Barton?
Yeah, earlier, and maybe I misunderstood, there was a slide and you said Arapahoe County has this funding, but Aurora residents can't apply for it, but Aurora residents are residents of Arapahoe County.
Yeah.
Wasn't clear.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is correct. Arapahoe County doesn't allow folks living in Aurora, so it's more of their folks in like Littleton or more eastern rural areas, or even bleeding into Denver. Emma and I have reached out.
Is that because we get funding and maybe Littleton doesn't? Otherwise, it doesn't seem equitable to single out a city.
Yeah, Emma and I did reach out to Arapahoe County, and they had said that there was something built into the funding that made it so they couldn't offer it to our folks. There was some like duplication. Emma might be able to explain that a little bit better.
Yeah, so it sounds like because we get funding and maybe these other jurisdictions don't, possibly.
Yeah, exactly. I think because we're already providing funding, they would see that as a duplication of efforts, so they're trying to avoid that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor,
Councilmember Combs.
just a point of order. If my colleagues could observe the decorum of not laughing while we're talking about families being evicted, that would be very appreciated. Councilmember Sundberg and Jurinski.
Further questions or comments? I'm seeing none. Thank you so much for the update. Really appreciate it. Proposition 3E, Proposition 123, Affordable Housing Program update. Jeff Hancock, Community Development Financial Supervisor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Jessica Prosser, Director of Housing and Community Services. I'm going to kick it off and I'll turn it over to Jeff. This is a follow-on informational item. As Council may recall, there was a resolution passed in January of this year. We have worked closely with the state over the past several months, had several technical assistance calls as all of the specifics around the legislation have been worked out and how cities can commit or sign on to the funding. So at this point, we are providing an update on the number of units that we will be committing to, the different types of things, programs that are offered. Some have already opened up. Many of you may have heard from developers already that are interested in applying for this funding. So we wanted to just provide a general update for council on that. We also know that there are pieces that aren't perfect with this legislation. As Liz Rogers had previously mentioned, Prop 123 is one of our legislative priorities for this summer and next year. We're already talking with several other jurisdictions about components of the legislation that can be tweaked or tightened up to make more sense. Aurora, because we are a larger jurisdiction, we're looking at having a pretty heavy burden on the number of units that would have to be created. So we're going to sign on and commit for now to unlock the funding, but really want to be able to tweak some things to have it make more sense. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff to just run through some of the technical aspects and then our timeline for commitment.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jeff Hancock. I'm the Financial Supervisor with Housing and Community Services. I'd like to start by just giving a brief summary of Proposition 123. It is a law that was passed by Colorado voters last year in 2022 that directs a small portion of state income tax revenue to affordable housing projects across the state. That funding equates to roughly $291 million per fiscal year. The funds are administered by the state's Department of Local Affairs Office and the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. And the program supports programs such as land banking, down payment assistance, building new affordable housing and preserving existing affordable housing throughout the state, and assisting persons experiencing homelessness. To be eligible to access these funds, cities such as Aurora must identify a baseline number of existing affordable housing units in their community and then commit to increasing that number by 3% annually over the next 3 years. The baseline number comes from data sources supplied by the state or other methodologies that Aurora and other cities can come up with that must be approved by the state. The lowest baseline number for Aurora from the data supplied by the state is roughly 34,000 existing affordable housing units in Aurora today. And while we feel that number is high because it does not contain only deed restricted units, but it also includes what the state refers to as naturally occurring affordable housing units, meaning that the housing that is theoretically affordable to individuals and families at a certain percentage of the area median income. So we are continuing to work with the state to justify a lower baseline number, but we are prepared to opt in now at the 34,000 number to unlock access to funding prior to the November 1st, 2023 deadline. At the projected baseline number of 34,000 existing units, Aurora would be committing to adding just over 1,000 new affordable housing units annually over the next 3 years. Our next slide is an attempt to show what the estimated cost would be if Aurora had to fully fund 1,000 new affordable units annually under Proposition 123. And that cost of bringing those 1,000 new units every year online would nearly exceed the amount of funding available statewide. So this highlights the need to continue to partner with developers and other community agencies as we currently do with our limited federal funding and other funding sources to bring that new affordable housing to the city. This update is meant to inform Council of the city's intent to opt in to Proposition 123 by the end of this month at that 34,000 baseline number, and we are happy to answer questions at this time.
Mayor?
Sorry, Councilmember Coombs?
Yeah, so I know in the Horns Committee, we discussed that that number does include naturally occurring affordable units. So if we had an increase of naturally occurring affordable units, either due to the same kind of market factors that lead us to have those units now, or if we had developers that without subsidy built units that counted as naturally occurring affordable, could we count those toward the number that we're reporting to the state?
So, Councilmember Coombs, the way the legislation is written now, it's naturally occurring, deed restricted, anything and everything on the input of the baseline.
Oh, we just lost.
Oh, we lost you, Jessica.
Restricted. So we're really comparing apples to oranges there.
So Jessica, I think we lost you.
You might have
But
to
I
stop the video.
remember this from the committee now that you mention it. That on the input they count the naturally occurring affordable. On the output, they're not counting that, which does seem like a huge problem because we could have developers willing to build non-deed restricted units, but at prices that would be considered affordable, and those wouldn't count toward the output. So we definitely need to work with the legislature on that, and hopefully we would be able to, because it doesn't really make sense to not count those in both instances.
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, I also have that same concern, because as stated, if we have a developer that is willing to do affordable housing and yet they're not deed restricted, then we can't count them. On the baseline of 34,000, we would have to increase units by 1,020.
We'd have to increase the units by 3% annually, which comes out to a little bit more than 1,000 per year.
Yeah, 1,020.
Yes.
So, and what happens if we don't reach that?
So at the end of the 3-year period, as of December 2026, it will be determined whether Aurora and other cities who opt in have met their requirement goal. If Aurora did not meet that goal, we would not be eligible to apply for additional funding in the following year, 2027, and then could apply at the end of 2027 for 2 additional years of funding in 2028 and 2029. So there's no real penalty in terms of paying any money back and that sort of thing, but we would have to basically sit out 1 year of participating in Proposition 123 in the year 2027.
Okay, and when they're counting existing affordable housing, as you know, a lot of people are staying put in their homes. They're not moving. I mean, interest rates are really high. So if I'm in an affordable housing unit, whether I'm a homeowner or I rent, if I can, I'm going to stay. So do they take that into consideration?
I think it's all about either creating new affordable units or preserving existing affordable units. So I don't think that would really factor into the calculation.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. This is for information only, so there's no action to be taken. Item number 4A, Denver Broncos funding for youth activities. Rachel Whipple, Community Engagement Coordinator.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Thank you for having me to present on the Denver Broncos funding for youth activities and update for you all. The spreadsheet before you contains the funding recommendations that have taken into consideration the feedback received from the community during the Dream Big for Aurora Youth Project, City Council ideas, city strategic goals, and department master plans. We have $3.8 million in funding, and we are currently looking at just over $4 million worth of projects. So with a difference of about $243,000. So Mayor Coffin, I will turn this back over to you for discussion.
Very well. Questions or comments?
Mayor Gardner.
Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was looking this over today and kind of doing some math. And with the additional requests that came in today for Councilmember Drinsky, I think if we reduce Councilmember Lawson's ask from $1 million to 500,000, we could fund everything on here. So I don't know if Councilmember Lawson would consider that, but that's what I would propose. And then we could fund everything that's on this list, including the additional request from Councilmember Drinsky today for 100,000.
Yes, Councilmember Gardner, looking at the spreadsheet because it looks like they're all pretty good projects. I'll go ahead and amend my proposed 1 million to 500,000 for chance sports funding.
Okay. Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember Moreno.
Jurinsky. I would like to clarify that my ask originally was 60,000, but after talking to some of my colleagues today, I felt like I wanted to increase that to 100,000. And there's several reasons for that. If anybody has any questions about Positive Pack Service Foundation, I know I threw mine in late. I'm happy to answer those questions, but I would like to ask that that be increased to 100,000, which is what Councilmember Gardner just said.
Mayor,
Councilmember Bergen.
I'm good with the, with the, everybody getting funded. I think that's great. And I thank Councilmember Lawson for making that happen.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. First, I just want to say go team. I'm really excited that everyone's going to get their projects funded. And Councilmember Jurinski, if you wouldn't mind just giving us like a quick, rundown on the positive pack, the increase. I support what you're doing. I just want to know like why the 40,000 more?
Because each dog roughly costs about $20,000 per dog. And they have 3 children right now that they have dogs, they have puppies in training for currently, but they have 7 outstanding applications. So I feel like if we just include 40,000 more, we can fund 5 dogs, and they have a commitment from a business group to match any donation that we get tonight. So that would actually cover all 10 children if we can raise this to 100,000.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, Rachel, is this does this require any action, or is this an update at this point?
Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this is just an update at this point.
Very well.
From here, we'll work on agreements and things like that we'll come back to you if needed for approval based on our purchasing policy.
Okay. Item number 5A, rules of order and procedure, amend section F, appendix B. Councilmember Zavonic.
Thanks, Mayor. So this resolution or rule change is actually pretty straightforward. It's seeking to address an inconsistency we have as a city when we take a position on a state statute that's going through the legislative process. It requires us to bring it forward to the FISR process, and then a simple majority of 6 members of council can then vote to take a position officially on the city's behalf for or against state legislation. The inconsistency is that if there is a state statute that is either brought forward by citizens through the initiative process or referred to the ballot through the referendum process, it requires a unanimous vote. And so what I'm proposing is that we make it consistent, that it requires that simple vote. We would still go through the FISR process. So if there's a statewide ballot measure that's statute, it could be brought to FISR, brought to council, up or down. You get 6 votes. We could take a position on it. I know that there are statewide measures, such as constitutional measures, and I would be open to the idea of making a higher threshold. Just as there is to pass a statewide constitutional measure, it requires 55%. So if we wanted to say that there was a 2/3, if it were constitutional change, I'd be open to that. But I think in terms of statutes, if we can take a position with just 6 of us going through the General Assembly process or the legislative process, I think we should be able to do the same if it's a citizen-led initiative or a referred measure by the General Assembly to the voters. So that's what this rule change would do, to create a consistency there.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So Councilmember Zavonic, you mentioned statutory changes here, but my read on this also looks like it would apply to local code and charter changes. Is that correct?
George, I mean, my intention was to make it so that we could do it for statewide measures, because this actually came up as a result of a conversation we had around this fall. There's going to be measures on the ballot, but I would assume that it would apply to all measures.
George?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and council members. Yes, it would. We didn't discuss it any further. It's just one change in the wording.
Okay. Further discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
So, but current ordinances just need a majority right now. This is, you said, for state statutes.
Right.
That go to the ballot?
Right.
Okay.
Right. I think I'm sorry, Mayor, if I could, I think what Councilmember Marcon was talking about, if there were an ordinance that were citizen-led initiative or constitutional change that we're citizen-led initiative, that we could take a position because that would have been done outside of the council process. I think that's what he was referring to.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and specifically to include local initiatives as well. So
Yeah.
Further questions or comments? Is there any objection to moving 5A forward? Seeing none, 5A will move forward. 5B, city watering schedule, Councilmember Jurenski.
Yeah, so this is just basically stating that, we make up a whole bunch of rules for the residents of the city of Aurora, and we don't follow several of them ourselves. So this one is just stating that we will follow the city watering schedule ourselves. I found out that we are not in many, many ways. One thing I also found out is the city does have a variance program that would be consistent with following the watering schedules because this is an approved program. There's several accounts in this variance programs, multiple business complexes, Aurora Marketplace, Kaiser Permanente, Raytheon, Regis High School, and several HOAs and metro districts. There are 843 accounts currently enrolled. So we as the city aren't even in this variance program working with the water department to figure out how we can cut down on our watering. So in talking with Marshall and in talking with Brooke Bell, I think we very much at least have to be in this variance program, but there has to be a consequence. There has to be a consequence if we are not following the variance program city watering schedule.
Marshall, can you comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, members of council. I agree. We do have a bunch, hundreds, as Councilwoman Jurenski mentioned, of accounts in the variance program. The parks properties have been following some of the variance program, but not been following, basically they haven't had the consequences of the variance program. So in conversations, I think it's a very reasonable proposal to include and I visited with Brooke and Councilman Jurenski, and I think all of us agree that it would be appropriate and reasonable to have the pros properties follow all the rules of the variance program, include them in the same process as the variance program. The consequence, if they don't comply with the terms of the variance program, ultimately would be that they would be restricted to the same days a week watering restrictions that the residential customers are. The way the variance program works outside of that is we give them a volumetric allocation. Water conservation staff monitors that water use with the customers over time and evaluates the evapotranspiration associated with the different vegetation to calculate the allocation, and then tracks that actively for the customers, communicates monthly. And as the properties might struggle with that, they're asked to come up with essentially a plan immediately on how they're going to get on schedule. And if they can't get themselves on schedule and create that plan, then they're essentially booted out of the variance program. They revert to the 3 days a week watering and are treated like single family residential. So some of that we're doing with the parks accounts, and we haven't technically implemented the consequence part. So I think that's what the proposal is. And I think that that's a reasonable proposal.
Mayor?
Councilmember Berger.
So I understand the intent behind this. I guess I'm a little bit confused because I'm reading the resolution. It says that all of our city, basically all of our city parks and golf courses would have to abide by the same guidelines as residential customers. But now you're mentioning the variance program. And are the golf courses in the variance program? Because I would not want to see our golf courses turn brown because it's a revenue producing enterprise. And I would think golfers would probably not want to golf on golf courses that don't look good. But also on the second part, section 2 of the resolution, it says that we will not water the Great Lawn.
Oh, that was supposed to have been, Mayor,
Rest of the year.
that was supposed to have been taken out. I guess it wasn't. As far as the golf courses, so Marshall, our golf courses do have an exemption, right?
Yeah, the golf courses, the private golf courses are all governed by an individual agreement that
But what about
provides.
the city?
Well, the city golf courses are similar to the private golf courses in some ways. The private golf courses each have an individual agreement. The city golf courses, we would in some ways, we can do things very similar with the golf courses that we would with the first parts of the variance program, which is calculate the evapotranspiration, track water use, optimize, make sure they're efficient, but they would be different. The turf is different, the greens are different, so they would have some similarities to a variance program, but they would irrigate less volumes of water more frequently is one of the primary things they do.
Well, can I ask you, don't they use different water? Don't they use raw water?
Some use raw water and some use reclaimed water. And then some of the private ones use groundwater. So
I guess, sorry to interrupt, because I'm in concept good with this. If we take out section 2, because section 2 says we will not water the Great Lawn for the rest of the year and let it go dormant. So if that's taken out, but I don't know if this needs some tweaking in the language just to make sure we're achieving the goal that Councilmember Jurenski wants, but that we're not going to cause a negative consequence for the golf courses.
Yeah, so as I stated, the Great Lawn portion was supposed to have been taken out.
Okay.
And in finding out about this variance program and learning all about it, really going in depth, learning about the variance program, I have some wording that's what will hold the city. So the city will be held to those standards as our businesses, our metro districts, in that variance program. So that would just be the one inclusion is the variance program that I would update this resolution with, and that's it.
So you're gonna tweak the language for it to move forward, correct?
Only to include.
Let's be recognized by the chair from now on.
Back and forth.
Only to include, instead of the city will follow the residential watering schedule, the city will follow the variance program watering schedule. That's it.
Okay.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 5B forward? Seeing none, item number 5B will move forward. 5C, dumpster enclosure. Councilmember Jurenski.
Yes, thank you. Adrian, do you have my photos ready to go?
Councilmember Jurenski, I don't have your photos. Did you send them to Adrian Botham? Cecilia's got them. Thank you.
Yeah, I sent them several hours ago.
They're up.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so this is what the city of Aurora currently requires on all developers, all business owners for commercial dumpster enclosures, that all 4 sides have to be enclosed. So this is a picture of it, and you see some of these around town. Can we go to the next photo, please? So here is the Aurora Library, which sits on a very main road. I happened to get the photo when the shade was perfectly behind the tree today. Adrian, that just went pretty blurry, actually. Thank you. But as you can see, we ourselves don't have 4-sided trash enclosures for our dumpsters. Can we go to the next photo, please? And this is sitting on a main road. This is Chambers. This is also sitting on a main road, Hamden. This is fire station number 6. You can clearly see where and how the dumpster is positioned. Ultimately, none of this bothers me. I have been staring at these dumpsters in the Mission Viejo Library for, well, my whole life. But the bottom line is we cannot have rules for the city that we do not follow ourselves. So I think that this is an unnecessary development step. I think, and also too, there's a public safety aspect to having dumpsters completely enclosed that my staff has actually had to deal with. It makes it easier for people to hide in the dumpster enclosures, to be in your dumpster, and also to dump things like furniture, TVs. It makes it a lot more accessible for that. And that goes back on the business owners in the city. So I am requesting, there was one word change, changing instead of will, it will be, or instead of shall, it will be may. So if somebody still wants to build a big, glorious trash enclosure, they're more than welcome to, but we are no longer going to require it as part of the development process. And city code enforcement will no longer be allowed to ticket and fine businesses for this.
Is there anybody that is staff that could give the rationale for having four-sided enclosure? There's somebody from code enforcement here.
Yes, Sandra Youngman, Manager of Code Enforcement.
Yes, Sandra. Can you give
sorry.
the rationale for yeah, go ahead.
Well, so it's the aesthetics to the city. Dumpster sitting out is really not very attractive for our city when people are driving by. Councilmember Jerinsky says she's seen them for a number of years. Graffiti ends up on these things. So then if they're outside of the dumpster, then we have graffiti that we're dealing with as well. Inside the dumpster, the trash will hopefully be within the enclosure instead of all around the area. And that's part of the reasoning.
Mayor.
Councilmember Bergen?
Oh, Jerinsky.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Jerinsky, go ahead.
Yeah, so I can tell you firsthand that as far as graffiti, they just graffiti our trash enclosures. So that doesn't stop the graffiti, whether they're graffitiing our dumpsters or whether they're graffitiing our trash enclosures. That I don't see that as any sort of valid reason, as well as, again, we as the city cannot even follow these rules.
Well, I think the question could be, I mean, we can go either way. I think one question is, do we just eliminate the requirement or do we make the requirement uniform for the public sector as well as the private sector? Councilmember Bergen.
Mayor.
Bergen.
Mayor,
Please proceed.
is that me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So for me, I think it's terrible that Mission Viejo Library didn't have it enclosed and that the fire station didn't have it enclosed. I think we do need to follow our own rules. I think it's a bad look for the city to have dumpsters not enclosed and just out there for full view. Are there instances, I guess what I don't like in the resolution or the ordinance is changing it to may, because that just gives anybody the option to not do it. Could we do this more on a, if their dumpster is not visible from the road, maybe then it would be an exception to not have to do the enclosure. But if it's visible, I mean, I personally think it needs to be enclosed. I don't want our city to look like Las Vegas or worse.
Sandra, is that enforceable though? I mean, whether or not it's visible from the road?
Oh, yeah, so many site plans require some dumpsters and closures. That's what we'd be enforcing. So if it's behind the building, if there's a dumpster enclosure, we would enforce it there. It also keeps the trash in one area type of thing,
No,
rather than strewn all
ma'am.
around.
Yeah, Councilmember Bergen.
No, I'm asking for clarification. You're saying you would enforce it. I'm saying if it's not visible to the public, would that be an exception that they don't have to do the enclosure? Because I get part of the point, but I'm personally for enclosures unless the business has it where it's not visible to the public, and then I guess we maybe would not need an enclosure. And does it have to be four-sided or can it be two-sided?
I believe there's some situations where it says three-sided. So I'd have to do some further research on that for you.
Okay, but did you answer my question on if it's visible from the road? If it's not visible,
So
if it's not visible, do we require it to be enclosed?
it would depend on what's the site plan for the commercial site. So the site plans actually designate if there's a dumpster enclosure.
Oh, it tells you. Okay.
Yes. And what is in the ordinance right now is that she's may be screened by a dumpster enclosure or as stipulated on a site plan is what's.
Okay,
what's the
so there
wording
is that
on the, yes.
or stipulated. So, okay, if I'm a business owner and I don't have to submit a site plan, I mean, do existing business owners have to submit site plans?
Once they're developed, they operate under the site plan that they've been approved on. And so for the sites that Councilmember Jurinski has noted, I'd have to go back and research this, but my suspicion is that those sites and site plans were approved prior to the requirement in the city's code, site development code, that requires trash enclosures. And so if there's any other property that was developed before that requirement came into being, their site plan remains in effect. And so what code does when they go out and enforce different codes, typically on things where they're looking at site maintenance, things like that, they're going off of the approved site plan, whether that site plan was approved last year or last century. And so that's, they're going back to the site plan that's been approved. And so, I believe that, any new building that the city's coming in, so Central Rec Center, Southeast Rec Center, those were done under the current code, which requires trash enclosures.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mayor.
Councilmember Bergen.
So if their site plan was done before the requirement for the enclosure and they don't have to, they still don't have to.
Correct.
Okay, but anybody new would have to submit the site plan and the site plan would say shall or may, unless it's specified in the site plan.
Yeah. Hey, Mayor Jurinski.
Councilmember Jurinski.
So we are literally saying out loud that it's okay to see some trash in the city if it was built before a certain time. But now the rest of the trash we don't want to see. But some trash is okay right on Chambers and right on Hamden. That's okay. It's okay to see all that.
It's not okay with me.
Yep. Mayor, if I may.
That's really what we're saying is it's okay to see some trash.
Councilmember McConnell, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, sir. So a couple of things here. I haven't worked on a project since I began my career in 2007 that didn't require a trash enclosure for a commercial property. The reason that we have some properties in the city that don't have those, if I had to guess, is that they were built before the code was updated. And y'all know we adopt the latest international building code, every 5 or 6 years or so in the city. So, and that's been pretty standard fare, at least since I've been in the AAC industry. I think part of the issue here, no one's saying that it's okay to see trash enclosures. It's just that we haven't gone back and updated our own city facilities. And you see similar issues with accessibility, for example. So buildings that weren't built before, or that were built before the ADA are not accessible, and they often have to be retrofit, and that tends to be very expensive. That's typically triggered when there's a substantial tenant improvement that gets done. I've worked on properties where we have done substantial site plan modifications, and then we have to bring the whole thing up to code. In some jurisdictions, it's not just adding a trash enclosure, it's actually adding a trash compactor as well. So that can be pretty expensive, as you can imagine. So I guess my question to staff is, what year did we adopt the code that required trash enclosures? And then is adding trash enclosures part of the SIMP?
Mayor Sundberg.
And Councilmember Connell, just to respond to that, we would be happy to get back to you with that information, with just a little more notice about this. So we would be happy to look that up and provide that information.
Okay.
Councilmember Sundberg.
Oh, thank you. Around the city in a few places, I've seen 3-sided trash enclosures that seem to work and keep bins out of the public eye without having to put a type of gate on the front of them. Is that going to be acceptable still, or do we need to say 4 sides here?
Sandra or Jessica?
I think that would depend on we enforce what's on the site plan. So that would be the planning decides. My understanding, planning would decide what kind of trash enclosure would be on that site.
Okay.
Mayor.
Councilmember Sundberg, did you have a follow-up?
No, Jurenski.
No, go ahead,
Councilmember Jurenski.
So, I mean, I would be okay with a 2-sided or 3-sided trash enclosure because, like I said, this is also a public safety matter. Everybody seems to have a problem with looking at trash, but I don't know if anybody's driven around Aurora. We have a whole lot of homeless people crapping on our sidewalks, and maybe nobody has a problem with that, but they go into our trash enclosures, and again and again and again, this is put on the business owner to clean it up. I have found needles. You name it, I have found it. These enclosures are a public safety issue when you cannot see what's around these dumpsters. It is a different city than what it used to be. And again, all of you that have a problem with seeing trash, I encourage you to drive around the area of Iliff and 225 or Parker Road and 225.
I think you raised some good points, Councilmember Jurenski. I'm just concerned, having owned a property management firm for a number of years, in an apartment building, if you don't have the enclosure, what happens is people miss the dumpster, unfortunately, and the trash is visible to the outside. When you have enclosure, it's not visible. And so I think you raised some good concerns. I think there's some lighting issues that I know a lot of apartment buildings are upgrading. But if Sandra, a question or you or Jessica, is the public sector under the same standard as the private sector when it comes to this particular requirement?
For their trash can placement for residential properties?
So and we saw the library, we saw AFR building a facility. Are they under the same requirements? I get the grandfathering in, but otherwise, is government under the same requirements of the private sector when it comes to enclosure?
Yes, and I can check those sites that Councilmember Jurenski's bringing up as far as the library, and I'd have to look at the fire station. I would have thought they would have had a trash enclosure for their location, but I'll be happy to look those locations up to see what's on them. But yes.
Is there further comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember Coons.
So I guess kind of trying to find a compromise situation. Councilmember Jurenski, you mentioned having like 2-sided, right? So that they're still shielding from view, but not fully enclosing. Like I would imagine up against certain buildings, like you could have just like an L or something that would keep a little bit of openness for the employees. I understand that concern for the workers of not having to walk into a fully enclosed area to throw away trash as part of their job and not be able to see what might be going on before they come in as a safety issue. So I wonder if there's a way of modifying this so it can still require some type of enclosure. And maybe that's at least two-sided and some type of specific requirements about shielding from view rather than just striking. I know that makes it a little more complicated than just striking a few words, but I wonder if there's some way we can just kind of specify more clearly what we can do to achieve both aims, having the trash shielded from view and not necessarily having to have it be on all four sides. And then I do agree the city should be following the same rules as everybody else in that regard.
Well, let me just say, whenever you have an open side, the trash is gonna migrate, off the enclosure.
Mayor?
Off that area. Further questions or comments?
Mayor,
I'm sorry,
Janine Rustad.
oh,
Director.
Jean, please.
I was scrambling and looking for our UDO section on this. And the current UDO says dumpsters shall be screened on 3 sides by a minimum 6-foot high masonry wall or opaque fence. So that is in UDO. We can coordinate with other code sections to make sure we have consistency there.
Okay.
Mayor,
Councilmember Jersey.
yeah, so then can we make sure that code enforcement understands that 3 sides are acceptable?
So again, the UDO is used to approve a site plan, and once that site plan is approved, that is what code enforcement utilizes is the approved site plan. So as we've discussed about, there are probably sites out in Aurora that don't have any trash enclosure, or perhaps are even in original Aurora, and they may have a dumpster in the alley, which you often saw sort of in that layout of an urban, environment. So it really depends upon the site when they were approved. We don't go back and retroactive new requirements as the code is updated. The only time that requirement would kick in is when a site were substantially redeveloped. With that said, we are looking at all city sites. The 3 deputies have talked to all of our departments and asked them to look at their facilities. We understand the concern over an appearance of do as we say, not as we do. So Councilmember Jurinski has brought up an important issue. So we are looking at all the city facilities, and we'll be working on a plan to bring them, provide a trash enclosure if possible for those sites. And certainly if they are required under their approved site plan to have a trash enclosure, we'll make sure that it's being utilized. They are following their site plan. And those that don't, we're going to look and see if we can retrofit and update their site plan to provide a trash enclosure.
Mayor,
I'm sorry,
Jurinski again.
Councilmember Jersey.
So then I am if that's the case, Jason, you're telling me that, but a year, 2 years is unacceptable to build trash enclosures. I am willing to pull this for tonight. I drive this city maybe more than any council member on this council. I will be driving every city property, and this ordinance will come back with a vengeance if I don't see trash enclosures on city property.
I didn't get to finish my statement, which is I was going to be asking you to survey all of our facilities for us, ma'am, and tell us which ones need it. So
just give me a hat and a whistle, Jason. A hat and a whistle. I'm going out.
I'm kidding, ma'am. No, we talked about that. We understand that you're again. We do not want to be a do as we say, not as we do. So we will be looking at that. If you've already brought 2 of them to our attention, if you're aware of others, please bring them to our attention. And the only caveat I will add is, if possible. And the reason I say that is particularly on fire stations. We know that in some of our fire stations, they are on very small parcels. Parking is at a premium. So we know that that may be a challenge. So, but for those that we can't, we will bring back to council and tell you why we think it's a problem and maybe what we're doing to perhaps try and meet the spirit, if not the letter of the law in those cases.
Well, Mayor, can I say one more thing?
Yes, Councilmember.
So on that note, Jason, I don't have a problem seeing these dumpsters. I mean, I grew up in Aurora before the UD. I mean, I looked at dumpsters my whole life. Who cares? My issue is so then if planning and zoning, if you cannot get your site plan approved without building in a 3-sided enclosure, then that should take care of all new development. So then my issue is then not planning and zoning and not changing the UDO. Then my issue is with code enforcement. Because if people are seeing, older buildings, the city's buildings, I don't care if I see dumpsters. I mean, I just don't care. But then it shouldn't be enforced by code enforcement. It should be the rule for planning and zoning, and with the UDO on all new builds to have this requirement. But I think that with that, we keep that stipulation, but we make it not enforceable by code enforcement. If they can't get their site plan approved without building it, then it's going to be built. And in the meantime, we don't need code enforcement officers out here harassing business owners when all of our dumpsters are hanging out. So maybe that's the answer.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councilmember Jersky, did you want to pull it or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I said I would pull it for now.
Okay, thank you. Now with that, item number 5D, single subject ballot initiatives, Councilmember Gardner. Councilmember Gardner.
Mayor, this is Cecilia. Councilmember Gardner appears to be, he's part of the participant list, but he did mention, he sent us a notice that he was pulling this item. And I'm wondering if he's not responding, that he's not in the meeting anymore.
Very well. Seeing no further business before the Aurora City Council meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Now.